Al won, but the literal financial balance sheet of my life. 15 years ago, I wasn't Dr. Zoe, the untouchable surgeon in a penthouse. I was 17-year-old Zoe, sitting in a humid bedroom in suburban Ohio, staring at a laptop screen that was about to ruin my life. It was acceptance day. I had just been admitted to Columbia University. It was my ticket out of that suffocating house, away from the mediocrity my parents seemed to worship. I logged into my student savings account to pay the enrollment deposit. This was money I had earned myself scrubbing floors at the local diner since I was 14, babysitting neighbors' kids and tutoring until my eyes blurred. I had saved exactly $48,212. I hit refresh. The balance read $0.00. I didn't scream. I remember blinking, thinking it was a glitch. I refreshed the page again. Zero. I clicked on the transaction history. A single withdrawal made that morning titled simply Transfer to Checking. I stood up. The hallway floorboards creaked under my feet, a sound I had memorized so I could sneak out to study late at night. From the living room, I heard laughter. Not just laughter, but the sound of popping champagne corks. I walked into the room and the scene froze. My parents, Richard and Brenda, were standing there with cake. My sister Madison was in the center of the room holding a set of car keys and wearing a flower lei around her neck. Madison was 16, a year younger than me. She had just failed her sophomore year. She had been rejected from every summer program she applied to. My mother saw me and didn't even flinch. She just smiled a tight, nervous thing. She said, "Look who finally came out of her cave. Come have some cake, Zoe. We're celebrating." I asked her what we were celebrating. I asked her where my $48,000 was. The room went dead silent. Madison clutched the keys tighter to her chest. My father stepped forward, his face red, not with shame but with defensiveness. He told me to lower my voice. He said that Madison had been having a very hard year. She was depressed about her grades. She felt left out because I was always succeeding. They needed to do something to boost her self-esteem. So they bought her a brand new Jeep Wrangler and a gap year trip to Bali with my tuition money. I looked at them and suddenly the physics of our family made perfect sense. I was experiencing what psychologists call the glass child syndrome. Because I was strong, because I was competent, because I never asked for help, I became transparent to them. They looked right through me to focus entirely on the one who was cracked. My success didn't make them proud. It made them feel safe to ignore me. They assumed I would figure it out because I always figured it out. Madison was the squeaky wheel, the broken bird, and my future was just the fuel they burned to keep her warm. My mother sighed, wiping a crumb of cake from her lip. She said, "Don't be selfish, Zoe. You're smart. You'll get scholarships. You'll find a way. Madison needs this. She's fragile. You're strong." That was the moment the contract broke. They thought they were just moving money around in the family pot, but I realized I wasn't a member of the family to them. I was a resource. I was an asset to be liquidated whenever their golden child overspent her emotional budget. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a vase. I just nodded, turned around, and walked back to my room. I didn't pack clothes. I packed my birth certificate, my social security card, and my laptop. I left through the window that night. I didn't leave a note. You don't leave notes for thieves, you just change the locks. And for 15 years, that's exactly what I did. I changed the locks on my life, and I never gave them a key. People love to romanticize the struggle. They talk about the starving student days like it was some noble bohemian adventure. But there is nothing noble about hunger. Hunger is just a biological distraction that slows you down. I took a Greyhound bus to New York City with $80 in my pocket and a scholarship letter that covered tuition but not survival. While Madison was posting photos of herself doing yoga on a beach in Bali, captioned "Living My Truth," I was learning the truth about living on nothing. New York didn't care about my 4.0 GPA. New York cared about rent. I found a room in a basement in Queens that smelled like mildew and desperation. I stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night. I got a job working the graveyard shift at a hospital morgue because it was the only place that would let me study while I worked. For 4 years, my only company was the dead. They were quiet. They didn't ask for money. They were better roommates than my family ever was. The cost of becoming Dr. Zoe wasn't just tuition. It was $3,500 a semester for lab fees. It was $300 for a single neuroanatomy textbook. It was the choice between buying a winter coat or paying the electric bill. I chose the electricity so I could read my notes. I walked to class in the snow, wearing layers of thrift store sweaters, shivering so hard my teeth ached. I remember one Thanksgiving, I was 20 years old. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria eating a turkey sandwich from a vending machine. I checked my phone. My mother had posted a photo on Facebook. The whole family was gathered around a massive table. Roast turkey stuffing wine. Madison was there, tanned and smiling, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "So grateful for family." There was no empty chair for me. There was no mention of the daughter they had exiled. I was completely erased. That was the night I stopped feeling sad. Sadness is a luxury for people who have safety nets. I didn't have a net. I was walking a tightrope over a canyon. I realized that if I fell, no one was coming to catch me. I had to turn my heart into stone just to keep my balance. I replaced love with ambition. I replaced family with precision. I didn't become a neurosurgeon to save lives. I became a neurosurgeon because it was the hardest, coldest, most elite thing I could do. It was a fortress of competence that they could never climb. By the time I graduated top of my class, I wasn't Zoe anymore. I was a machine. I had burned away every soft part of myself to fuel the engine of my success. So when people ask me why I'm so cold, I tell them the truth. I didn't freeze myself. I was left out in the cold for 15 years. I just finally acclimated to the temperature. Back in my office in Seattle, the rain was streaking against the floor-to-ceiling glass. It was a gray, impenetrable wall, just like the one I had built around my life. The intercom on my desk buzzed, slicing through the silence. My secretary's voice was hesitant. She said, "Dr. Zoe, I know you have a strict no visitors policy, but security let 2 people up. They claim to be immediate family in crisis. They're refusing to leave." I stared at the speaker. I could have told security to drag them out. I had the power to do that now. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. It's a flaw in the system. I wanted to see them. I wanted to see what 15 years of bad investments looked like. I said, "Send them in." When the heavy glass doors opened, Richard and Brenda walked in. They looked smaller than I remembered. Time hadn't been kind to them. My father's shoulders were hunched, his jacket worn at the elbows. My mother's hair was thin, dyed a harsh, cheap yellow that didn't match her skin tone. They looked like strangers who had shrunk in the wash. But the moment they opened their mouths, the illusion of pity vanished. My mother didn't run to hug me. She didn't tear up at the sight of her estranged daughter. She looked around my office, at the sleek Italian furniture, at the view of the skyline, and she scoffed. She said, "Nice place. Must be nice to afford all this. Do you have any idea how much gas costs right now? We drove 3 days to get here." My father grunted in agreement. He said, "We called you. Why didn't you pick up? You think you're too important to answer your father?" I didn't offer them a seat. I didn't offer them water. I stood behind my desk, my white coat serving as armor. I looked at them with the same clinical detachment I used to examine a tumor. I said, "You have 5 minutes. State your business." My mother bristled at the tone. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She slammed it onto my pristine glass desk. It was a medical file. She said, "Dr. Evans in Ohio said the tumor is wrapping around my speech center. He said if anyone touches it, I'll never talk again. But he said you're the best. He said you can fix it." She looked at me then, not with love, but with expectation. It was the same look she used to give me when I brought home a report card with straight A's. It wasn't gratitude. It was the satisfaction of a customer receiving a service they felt entitled to. My father crossed his arms. He said, "You're going to do the surgery. We're family. You owe us this." I looked at the file, then back at them. They honestly believed that biology was a binding contract. They thought that shared DNA gave them the right to demand my labor, my skill, and my salvation after 15 years of silence. They were about to learn that in my operating room, I didn't take orders. I made incisions. I picked up the manila envelope. The paper felt heavy, like a verdict. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I walked over to the large digital light board on the wall and snapped the MRI film into the clips. The image illuminated the room with a ghostly blue glow. It was a textbook, glioblastoma multiforme, aggressive, chaotic, and sitting right on top of Broca's area, the part of the brain responsible for speech production. I turned back to them. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, until the only sound in the room was the hum of the air conditioning. I shifted into chief of surgery mode. My voice wasn't angry. It was terrifyingly flat. I pointed to the white mass on the screen. I said, "This is what is killing you. It is highly vascular. It is intertwined with the neural pathways that allow you to form words. Any surgeon who cuts here without absolute precision will sever those connections. You will wake up, you will be able to think, you will be able to scream inside your own head, but you will never utter a sound again. You will be locked in a silent prison for the rest of your life." My mother paled. Her hand went to her throat. My father looked at the floor, his blusters suddenly deflated by the clinical brutality of the truth. I continued. I said, "Dr. Evans was right. There are perhaps 3 people in the world who can resect this without causing permanent aphasia. I am the best of them. My mortality rate for this procedure is 0.4%. Relief washed over their faces. They heard what they wanted to hear. "I can save you." They smiled that same smug smile from 15 years ago, thinking they had won, thinking that my talent was still their property. Then I set the trap. I leaned back against my desk, crossing my arms. I asked, "Where is Madison?" The room froze. My father blinked. My mother shifted her weight nervously. I said, "Usually for a surgery of this magnitude, the primary caregiver is present. Post-operative care is brutal. You will need 24-hour assistance for months. Since you drove all the way from Ohio, I assume Madison is helping you, or is she flying in separately?" My father cleared his throat. He looked at the window, unable to meet my eyes. He said, "Madison is busy. She wanted to come, really, she did. But she's working. She has a career now. She's going through a hard time. We didn't want to burden her." I nodded slowly. Busy. Working. Hard time. The same excuses they had used to shield her for her entire life. They were painting a picture of a struggling young professional too important to be disturbed. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I said, "Interesting." Because I like to be thorough with my patients' support systems. So before you came in, I ran a background check. Not just on you. On everyone in the household. I reached into my drawer and pulled out a second file. This one wasn't medical. It was financial. I dropped it on the desk next to the MRI. The sound was like a gavel hitting a block. I said, "Let's talk about what Madison is actually doing." My father stepped forward, his face flushing red again. He said, "What is this? You're spying on your sister. That's illegal. It's public record, Richard." I cut him off. My voice was sharp enough to cut glass. I opened the file. I laid out the photos, the court documents, the credit reports. It was an autopsy of a failed life. I said, "Madison isn't working. She hasn't held a job in 6 years. The career you mentioned was a failed attempt at becoming a lifestyle influencer, which ended when she was sued by an agency for breach of contract. That lawsuit cost you $20,000 to settle." I flipped a page. I said, "She is currently 30 years old. She is still living in your basement. She has $60,000 in credit card debt, debt that is co-signed by you. And most importantly, she is 6 months pregnant with twins. The father is out of the picture." My mother gasped. She looked at Richard, betrayal in her eyes. She didn't know I knew. She thought they could hide the shame. I looked directly at my mother. I said, "You didn't come here because you missed me. You didn't come here because I'm the best surgeon. You came here because Madison told you no." I could see the truth hitting them. They flinched as if I had slapped them. I continued relentless. I said, "I know exactly what happened. You got sick. You asked your golden child for help. You asked the girl you bought a Jeep for, the girl you sent to Bali, the girl you stole my future for. And she looked at you and said, 'I can't deal with a dying mother right now. I have twins on the way. I need money, not a burden.'" The silence in the room was suffocating. My father looked old, defeated. My mother was trembling. I said, "You are broke. You spent your retirement, my college fund, and your home equity trying to float Madison's lifestyle. You have nothing left. You need me to perform a $300,000 surgery for free. And then once she recovers, you were going to ask me for money, weren't you? You were going to ask me to support the baby." To support Madison. I leaned forward. I said, "You aren't here for family. You are here because your investment failed. You poured every ounce of love and money into a hole in the ground, and now that the hole is empty, you're looking for the asset you sold off to bail you out." My father slammed his hand on the desk. He shouted, "She's your sister. She's struggling. We did what we had to do to protect her. You were always the strong one. You didn't need us." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. I said, "I didn't need you. I was 17. I was starving in New York City. I needed parents. What I got was a lesson in economics. And now class is in session." My father was shaking, now veins bulging in his neck. He pointed a trembling finger at me. He said, "You are heartless. You are a monster. You would let your own mother die just to prove a point, just to settle a score." I stood up. I walked around the desk until I was standing right in front of them. I was taller than them now. I wasn't the little girl they could dismiss. I was the authority in the room. I said, "This isn't about a score. This is about the sunk cost fallacy." I looked at my mother. She was crying now, silent, ugly tears running down her cheeks. I said, "You spent 30 years investing in Madison. You bet everything on her. You sacrificed my tuition, my trust, my love, all to buy her happiness. And it failed. The stock crashed. And now you want to hedge your bets. You want to cash out on a bond you tore up 15 years ago. But that's not how this works. You don't get to withdraw from an account you closed." I picked up the medical file, the MRI of the tumor, and I slid it back across the desk toward them. I said, "I am declining this case." My mother sobbed a loud, wretched sound. My father looked like he had been punched. He stammered, You can't. You took an oath. You have to help people." I said I took an oath to do no harm. But operating on you would harm me. A neurosurgeon needs steady hands, and every time I look at you, Brenda, my hands shake. I don't see a patient. I see the woman who watched me walk out into the night with nothing and didn't even get off the couch. I see the thief who stole my life to buy a Jeep. If I operate on you, I might slip. Not because I'm incompetent, but because a part of me, the part you broke, might want to slip. I walked to the door and pressed the intercom button. I said, "Security to Dr. Zoe's office. Escort 2 individuals out." My mother looked up, her face, a mask of terror. She pleaded, "Zoe, please. I'm sorry. We're sorry. I don't want to die." I looked at her, and for a second I felt a flicker of pity. But then I remembered the morgue. I remembered the vending machine turkey. I remembered the zero balance. I said, "Richard called me a monster. Maybe I am. But do you know the first rule of emergency medicine?" They stared at me, paralyzed. I said, "In an emergency, you put your own oxygen mask on first." I suffocated for 15 years so you two could breathe life into Madison. I am finally breathing on my own. I am not going to let you cut off my air supply again to save yourselves. The security guards arrived. They stepped into the room, their presence heavy and final. My parents stood up looking broken, shuffling toward the door like the elderly defeated people they were. As they reached the threshold, my father turned back one last time. He spat, "I hope you rot in this office. I hope you die alone with your money." I didn't flinch. I said, "Better to die alone in a penthouse than to live in a basement with your failures." The door clicked shut. The silence rushed back in, cool and sterile. I walked to the window and watched the street below. A few minutes later, I saw them. 2 small figures getting into a rusted sedan, driving away into the rain. I went to the sink in the corner of my office. I turned on the water, hot scalding. I scrubbed my hands. I washed away the dust of Ohio, the grease of the diner, the smell of desperation. I dried them on a plush towel. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a daughter. I saw a survivor. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and paged my next patient. If you've ever had to save yourself from the people who were supposed to protect you, share this story. And tell me in the comments, do you think I should have done the surgery, or did I make the right call?